Good day everyone, Complaining Gamer here. Game censorship and successful classification sometimes go hand in hand, one requiring the other for a game to be allowed on the market. This statement could not be more accurate for those of you who live in Australia. CD Projekt Red's highly anticipated upcoming title, Cyberpunk 2077, pushes the boundaries in the cyberpunk genre with the goal of delivering a true-to-concept experience without limitation. Reports suggesting gameplay which explores nudity, violence, gore, sex, drug use and strong language. Basically the perfect taboo recipe when it comes to passing the certification process, especially in Australia. After seeing multiple concerns from Australian gamers, I decided to take a look at the certification process, what the law says and how this has affected other titles in the past and whether or not Cyberpunk 2077 has a chance of being released there. In a June 15th article titled Cyberpunk 2077 will include full nudity for a very important reason, the game developers offered some insight into their view on fully exposed flesh. At the closed door exclusive E3 gameplay reveal during the character creation screen where you can choose between both male and female, the completely nude characters had one interesting distraction. Their genitals had been covered with pixelated white boxes of digital noise, leading to giggles in the room. CD Projekt Red game director Adam Badowski said that the white boxes were a tactical decision by the team, adding that in the final version of the game, the digital noise will likely be removed. CD Projekt didn't want to be accused of using nudity for shock value or to have its time with the international press sidetracked by conversations about male or female nudity in video games. "We covered these parts for one reason," said Badowski, "because during the presentation we don't want people to focus on and think about these things and laugh. It's normal. Nudity makes it more believable. That's why we want to have it. There's nothing special in it." The idea is to explore transhumanism, to transcend human limitations through the use of technology. There was one scene in particular from the E3 demo that Badowski pointed to as an example. It opened with a simple quest to retrieve a kidnapped woman, but turned into a bizarre and gruesome image. The kidnappers weren't holding her for ransom, they were planning to chop her up for spare parts, harvesting the high-tech implants throughout her body for sale on the black market. After players gun down the enemies in the compound, they find the kidnapped woman and another NPC lying naked in a bathtub filled with ice. With her eyes rolled back in her head and her body glistening with water, the player must carry her in their arms out into the light to the waiting paramedics. Nudity is important for us because of one reason, Badowski said. This is cyberpunk, so people augment their body. So the body is no longer sacred, it's profane. Because people modify everything, they are losing their connection to the body, to the meat. And that's why we need to use the nudity in many situations. You see that there are bodies in the tub and you need to take care of this woman, but at the same time she is augmented. He continued, searching for the right words, she is not clean. Maybe she is augmented too much. Maybe the humanity level is pretty low in her, so it's an interesting topic. It's one of the key themes in Cyberpunk. Who better to air their concerns than Australian gaming journalists who experienced the gameplay demo? Starting with Alana Pierce, writer-producer at IGN. She tweeted, "Just watched an hour of Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay. Holy shit. Game is totally gonna get banned in Australia. RIP."
Now, I want to talk about why I think it's going to be banned in Australia, and also some of the comparisons to The Witcher, which go hand in hand. It's drug use. Sure, it's violent. I don't think it's violent enough that it would get banned in Australia. That's not usually a thing. Australia has issues with sexual violence, not just combat violence. Did not see any sexual violence. Did see a lot of boob, though. The naked lady that you rescued at the start, I don't know if I mentioned that, just a lot of boob. She's quite naked, so the first 15 minutes of the demo is just a nipple on screen. It's well animated. So, the drug use is even similar to Judge Dredd as well. They take a kind of puffer thing that gives them certain abilities, or V was using it when she had her optics upgraded, I assume as some kind of antibiotic, a system that works to let the body kind of melt with that. There was also a part in the demo where we took one as a performance enhancer before heading out into combat, which is very similar to the way that potions work in The Witcher, more so in 1 and 2 than 3 as well, but you have to do a lot of prep and thinking about what you're going to do before you enter a situation that could have combat. And that's what this felt like. It felt like that same core thing that CD Projekt has really always sort of been about, is a lot of being meticulous and thinking about what you're doing in combat rather than just running in. I'm sure there are many variants of abilities on that, but because it is blatant drug use, and that's a huge thing that Australia has a problem with the classifications board, I legitimately do not think the game will be released in Australia. At the very least, they will have to alter those drugs in some way or alter the way that they are used in a certain way.
Then we have David Milner, editor of Game Informer Australia. He tweeted, "Very exciting stuff, but I can't shake the fear Australia's classification board is going to struggle with this one. Nudity, but more importantly drug use, a stim inhaler tied to gameplay benefits, which historically has been a strike." He also said, "To clarify, you have an inhaler that restores health and seems to give you some buffs. At a certain point, a guy that upgraded your tech gives you one and says take 2 puffs. It's plausible that more context will mean it's something else, but I think the implication is there." Another Australian gaming journalist, Julian Rizzo-Smith, tweeted, "Also, this game is totally not going to pass the classification board. Substance abuse, extreme nudity, violence, and I think gambling themes." Even with their knowledge in the specific arena of Australian gaming and censorship, they aren't game developers dealing directly with the legal limitations and could be prone to reactionary statements, as are many on the current hype train. With that said, let's jump into what the rules are and how they've impacted Australian gaming, along with statements from CD Projekt Red about an Australian release. The Office of Film and Literature Classification, OFLC for short, is a statutory classification body which provides day-to-day administrative support for the classification board which rates films, computer games and publications in Australia, and the Classification Review Board which reviews films, computer games and publications when a valid application has been made. While the analogous New Zealand body has the same name, both organisations are completely separate entities and as such ratings do differ between them. Let's start by looking at film and video game ratings in Australia. General. These films and computer games are suitable to be viewed by a general audience including children. The content is very mild. PG, parental guidance. These films and computer games contain material that a parent might need to explain to younger children. The content is mild. Mature. These films and computer games contain material that requires a mature perspective. The content is moderate. MA 15+, mature accompanied. People under the age of 15 must be accompanied by a parent or adult guardian for the duration of the film in the cinema. Parental permission to see an MA 15+ film is not sufficient. People under 15 are not permitted to hire or buy films or computer games classified MA 15+. The content is strong. Restricted. People under the age of 18 cannot purchase or rent the movie or computer games. Photo identification is needed. The content is of a high level. X restricted. People under the age of 18 cannot purchase or rent the movie. Photo identification is needed. The X rating applies to sexually explicit material. A rating of RC denotes refused classification, where the game is effectively banned from being sold or demonstrated in the country. There is no label as it is not a public rating. When it comes to the OFLC, the Australian consensus seems to be that they are behind the times, stuck in the past and inefficient, leading many disappointed Australian gamers to use a VPN to mask their location and use a service like GOG or Steam to purchase the game they want from an uncensored region, a common practice for many gamers in countries where censorship is rampant. List of banned video games in Australia. Originally, video games in Australia could only be rated up to MA 15+. At the time, the R18+ classification rating could be given to film, but a video game with content deemed fitting for the R18+ rating would be refused classification due to an appropriate classification not being available for the medium. In July and August 2011, all Australian State Attorneys General agreed to instate an R18+ rating for video games, which would be available by the end of 2011. Many games previously refused classification would now fit into the R18+ rating, and if the publisher chose to pay the reclassification fee, would theoretically be able to sell their game in Australia. The date was later changed to allow the rating to be introduced at the beginning of 2013. With the R18+ rating in place, it is expected fewer video games will be refused classification. Games may still be refused classification if deemed to contain material unsuitable for R18+ classification, such as depictions of sexual violence or the promotion of illegal drug use, as well as drug use that is related to incentives and rewards. More specifically, games which may be refused classification include detailed instruction or promotion in matters of crime or violence, depiction of rape, the promotion or provision of instruction in paedophile activity, descriptions or depictions of child sexual abuse or any other exploitative or offensive descriptions or depictions involving a person who is or appears to be a child under 18 years, gratuitous, exploitative or offensive depictions of violence with a very high degree of impact or which are excessively frequent, prolonged or detailed, cruelty or real violence which are very detailed or which have an extremely high impact, sexual violence, depictions of practices such as bestiality, gratuitous, exploitative or offensive depictions of activity accompanied by fetishes or practices that are offensive or abhorrent, incest fantasies or other fantasies that are offensive or abhorrent. Classification is compulsory, and games refused classification by the ACB are banned for sale, hire or public exhibition, carrying a maximum fine of $270,000 and or 10 years in jail. It is, however, legal to possess RC games except in Western Australia and prescribed areas of the Northern Territory. Now we'll take a look at some of the reasons why games were banned in Australia. Banned because of high impact gory violence. Banned because of drug use related to incentives and rewards. Banned because of high impact sexual references. Banned because of a scene of sexual violence. Banned because of sexuality and nudity in relation to incentives and rewards. Banned for high impact themes involving the glorification of graffiti. Banning it because of high impact violence involving torture. Banned because of interactive sexual activity involving a person who is or appears to be a child under 18 years. Banned because of high impact themes involving depictions of revolting and abhorrent content. Banned because of high impact violence and torture. Banned because of implied sexual violence related to incentives and rewards. Banned because of a scene of high impact sexual dialogue involving incest. Now, this is where things get interesting and have a direct connection to CD Projekt Red. We have The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings in the banned list, which was later modified and then re-rated. Banned because of sexuality and nudity in relation to incentives and rewards. A side quest was given a minor edit, changing the context of sex being used as an incentive, and the game was subsequently re-rated MA15+. Then we have a list of games which were banned, but subsequently released uncensored. If you're interested in diving deeper into the details yourself, I'll provide links to all of the content here in the description below. One game you may have noticed not in the list is The Witcher 3, as it successfully released uncensored in Australia. It received the classification of R18+, with the themes table listings as follows: themes, strong impact, violence, high impact, language, strong impact, drug use, moderate impact, nudity, strong impact, sex, high impact. When it comes to the classification of a game, there is a clear insistence on the use of the word impact, so let's explore what they mean exactly. Impact may be higher where a scene or gameplay sequence contains greater detail, including the use of close-ups and slow motion, uses extenuation techniques such as lighting, perspective, and resolution, uses special effects such as lighting and sound, resolution, color, size of image, characterization, and tone, is prolonged, is repeated frequently, is realistic rather than stylized, is highly interactive, links incentives or rewards to high impact elements. Impact may be lessened where reference to a classifiable element is verbal rather than visual. Also, some visual impacts have less impact than others. For example, an incidental depiction may have less impact than a direct one. In regard to releasing Cyberpunk 2077 in Australia, this is what CD Projekt Red had to say. Designer Patrick Mills said, "We're aware of the issue and we want to ship to as many people as we can. We've got a really great localization department. We've previously shipped Witcher 3 to markets that a lot of people told us we weren't going to be able to ship in," Mills told us. "So I'm confident we'll be able to handle it." A game close to release, which currently is banned in Australia, is We Happy Few. Let's see what their devs had to say about the Australia ban and tackling drug glorification. We Happy Few partially is a game about drug addiction and why people often choose to use drugs as a way to forget their past. Characters in We Happy Few use a drug called joy to forget the past, and the discussion around drug addiction is one of the most popular surrounding the game. It's a loaded topic, especially in wake of a growing opioid addiction in the United States, and one that led Australia's classification board to refuse to rate the game, effectively banning the game from being sold in the country. Alex Epstein, We Happy Few's narrative designer, told Polygon that the team hopes to convince the ratings board their team isn't trying to glorify drug use. I think we hope to convince them that the game is not very positive on the subject of drugs, or that, this is a fictional drug, Epstein said. This is a drug that is prescribed by very nice doctors with jaunty hats and everything, so the game is not in favour of illegal drugs. In fact, it's illegal to not take the drugs, so hopefully the classification board will change their minds. Now onto the classification process, the different types, costs and material that the developers need to provide for classification. Level 1, $1,210. Supporting material needed. A detailed written description of gameplay. Written documentation of contentious material that may lead to an M rating or higher on the computer games application form. Level 2, $890. Supporting material needed. A detailed written description of gameplay. A separate recording of any contentious material in the game that may lead to an M rating or higher, and typical gameplay footage. If your game is VR enabled, a list of access codes to contentious material in the game. Demonstrated, $2,460. Supporting material needed. A detailed written description of gameplay. A completed checklist for demonstrating a computer game, and either attachment one of the computer games application form or a separate recording of any contentious material and typical gameplay. If the board needs you to demonstrate your game and you have applied under a different fee, you need to pay the difference between the fees before processing can continue. Let's logically think about potential options CD Projekt Red have in circumventing any unfortunate ban or form of censorship. Best case scenario is that Cyberpunk 2077 passes classification and receives a rating of restricted 18+, the same as Witcher 3. Restricted is defined as material for adults. Such material may contain classifiable elements such as sex scenes and drug use that are high in impact. Some material classified R18+ may be offensive to sections of the adult community. A person may be asked for proof of their age before purchasing, hiring or viewing R18+ films and computer games at a retail store or cinema. Given CD Projekt Red's commitment to the project and Cyberpunk's creator Mike Pondsmith, it seems highly unlikely that they would be willing to dilute the vision behind this world in any significant way. What they could do is find creative ways to edit questionable content without losing the integrity of the cyberpunk culture. Debauchery is woven deep inside Night City, however, so is business. CD Projekt Red are highly respected in the industry by both critics and gamers alike, but they are also a business, so if they can find a way to share and sell their creation without dilution, then of course they will. The issue is in what form would that take? Drug use based on incentives is clearly off the table, unless somehow described in a very specific non-damaging way. Alternatively, enhancement drugs could become another classification accepted consumable closer to medicine or food or even cybernetic rather than substance based. Sometimes the level of specificity is staggering in these cases. Take for example Fallout 3, initially refused classification until morphine was named Med X. Ultimately, the depth, length and detail of each action in question, whether sexual or violent, will most likely determine the reaction of the board. The definitions which CD Projekt Red provide will be absolutely crucial in the success of classification. How and why do these things happen, and what is their impact? Most of these points and arguments addressed here can also be applied to other censor-heavy countries other than Australia as well, if you happen to live in such a place. These are simply my best guesses, of course, based on the information, so please feel free to agree, disagree, challenge or contribute to the argument. Leave a comment down below. In conclusion, and based on the classification process, the main contentious issue I see pertaining to the release of Cyberpunk 2077 in Australia revolves around incentives behind drug use, but also the extent to which each element of sex, nudity and violence takes. CD Projekt Red have complied with country-specific strict guidelines in the past when required, but currently have shown no sign of censoring any of the content in their upcoming title. In a worst-case scenario for Australian gamers, even if Cyberpunk 2077 were to be banned, you'd still be able to purchase the game through GOG or Steam with the use of a VPN. Ultimately, gamers, especially adults who expect control of the mature content they consume, should have the choice to decide what they experience. Cyberpunk 2077 is a mature game designed for a mature audience, and any type of censorship would lead to extreme frustration from those whose experience is limited because of it. There is no doubt that certain countries may impose strict limitations on a game of this nature if it goes as far as reports say. CD Projekt Red do have experience in the realm of managing contentious issues, however. Ultimately, I'm not Australian, this doesn't affect me personally, but I want everyone to have the full experience, which I believe will be deeply compelling and a universe worth diving into. I hope that tackling this topic as early as possible before release will lead to all gamers around the world being able to experience Cyberpunk 2077 undiluted. I'll finish with good luck to CD Projekt Red with the game, and fingers crossed.